get started, everybody. Good afternoon. We're ending with a bang, and I couldn't be more excited to have the opportunity to interview Jonathan Rosenberg and Alan Eagle, who are co-authors with Eric Schmidt on The $1 Trillion Coach, which is the story of Bill Campbell. It was actually 3 years ago at this conference on a Monday morning early where I learned that Bill had passed, which was an incredibly sad day for anybody that was in his ecosystem. But I can speak for one. I was fortunate to have coached football with him for 12 years, and he was actually on our little teeny board, which everybody looked at him as like he must be crazy to be on this little board at GSV because he was on Apple's board and he was a key advisor at Google and everything else. But I can honestly say I've never known anybody like Bill Campbell. I know I'll never know anybody like him again. So anyway, the book $1 Trillion Coach is phenomenal. It captures these lessons, and these two had a special window and did exhaustive interviews with over, I guess, 80 people.
80 people.
Yeah. So first of all, I mean, I gave that sort of rambling preamble, but for both of you, who was Bill Campbell, and how did you get to know him?
Well, I'll start. Bill Campbell started life, he grew up in Western Pennsylvania and went to Columbia to play football and was the captain of the Columbia football team when they won their only Ivy League title in 1962. Someone's laughing about Columbia football out there. Probably an alum, okay. And from there he went on to actually coach football for 12 years. He was a coach at Boston College and head coach at Columbia in the late 70s. And not very successfully. And so he went into business. He didn't go into business until age 39. He joined joined J. Walter Thompson and then Kodak, and then was hired by John Scully to come west to the Valley, Silicon Valley, in 1983. And he joined Apple and quickly rose through the ranks. Then was CEO of a couple of companies, Claris and Intuit, and then became an advisor and sort of the executive coach of Silicon Valley in 2000. And as you said, he was very close friends with Steve Jobs. When Steve rejoined Apple in 1997, Bill was the first board member that Steve brought on, and really they grew Apple together, and then he became an advisor to Eric and the staff at Google.
Well, and that's really, that brings us to how I met him. February 2002, I was a senior VP at Excite at Home, and Google was interested in hiring me. So I went through all of these interviews, and I figured like I had this preordained right to an offer, and I went to collect it. And Eric Schmidt puts me in this big conference room. It's empty. And this old guy walks in. And he comes in, and he comes into your space, right? Rosenberg. I spoke to Tom Jermaluk. I spoke to John Doerr. You're smart. You work hard. Don't give a shit. I got one question. Are you coachable? I'm like, depends on the quality of the coach. And he gets up and walks out. He says, smart Alex are not coachable. And I'm like, what just happened? And then I realized that Eric Schmidt said that he had a management coach. And my God, that must have been him. And my Google offer just disappeared into the micro kitchen. So I go out chasing him. Yeah. Coach Bill, sir, I'm so sorry, sir. And he goes, Rosenberg, button chair, back in the room. I go back in the room, I sit down. He comes back in and gives me a speech about humility. And then he comes back and he says, I got another question. If I were to be your coach, what would you want to get out of it? And I was like, well, I don't really need a coach, but I guess I need an answer. Fortunately, I had watched this episode of the Dallas Cowboys, and Tom Landry said, a coach hears the things you can't hear and sees the things you can't see so you can be the person you always wanted to be. And so I said that. And I think Bill kind of saw through it. But he said, all right, Rosenberg, I can coach you. And then we met every 2 weeks for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Jonathan does a pretty good Bill imitation.
It's an outstanding.
I'll be on your board.
There's a few adjectives that get thrown in usually when. But anyway,
This is a family conference, right?
It is. Well, anything can go.
Okay.
But I'll just give you my quick Bill Campbell story, how I met him. So my daughter, my oldest daughter Maggie, started going to Sacred Heart School in Atherton when she was in 6th grade. And Bill had a daughter, Maggie, but I didn't know any of his parents, I didn't know anybody there. And I get this email saying, his dads and daughters going to the baseball game. I said, okay, this will be a way to kind of meet some of these parents. And so I show up at Sacred Heart School on a Sunday morning, 10 o'clock in the morning. Here's this guy with a baseball cap, flips open a Bud Light, says, I'm Bill Campbell, who are you? So Bill sits next to me, and he starts asking me, what do you do? And I kind of puff my chest out. Well, I'm the CEO of this new investment firm in San Francisco, blah, blah, blah. I go, what do you do? He goes, oh, I'm retired. I said, oh, really? Well, what did you do? He goes, oh, I was in the software industry. Really? Who'd you work for? Intuit. Oh, really? What'd you do there? I was the CEO. And I'm kind of and we get to the baseball stadium, and I think I'm the only person in San Francisco who had no idea who Bill Campbell was, because whether it was the hot dog vendor or was the person in the owner's box, everybody knew this guy, Bill Campbell. So it was just remarkable. Then I had the privilege of coaching flag football with him for 14 years.
Wow. And that was, you said everybody knew Bill, and that was part of his charm, is that he was just a great guy to everybody. We heard stories about how they'd go on the annual baseball trip to Pittsburgh and other cities, and the vendors there would know him too. So it wasn't just San Francisco.
Money talks too. He's very nice. He's very friendly to everybody. Everybody was his friend, but he was a very good tipper as well.
Yeah, that helps.
That makes a difference.
Yeah. So talk about Bill's leadership style, and talk. We had an interesting conversation just before we came up here about some of the stuff that you learned even just writing the book that you kind of didn't kind of codified.
Yeah, I think somebody asked me the other day how long it took me to learn Bill's lessons. And I think one of the things that I realized was it took me more than 10 years of biweekly sessions to learn Bill's lessons. And I learned more as I interviewed people for the book. And I think the first lesson I really learned from Bill is that your title makes you a manager, but it's your people that make you a leader. And having your people elect you captain of the team is a compliment of the highest order, and that's something that's different from showing up and being a dictator and making decisions and telling them what to do. And I think Bill really taught me the difference between evaluating people and doing performance reviews and telling people what to do, as opposed to kind of treating them as people and showing them trust and respect and support and challenging them to be better. And doing all of that with management practices that were so rigorous that they looked at you and said, gee, I want to be more like that. I want to run my one-on-ones that way. I want to run my staff meetings that way. I want to drive to make decisions that way. So it really was teaching you the fundamentals of how to manage a team and how to build trust with your team and a sense of community on your team that he taught us, which then put us in a position where people would follow us.
Well, it would start with, his leadership principles started with being a good manager, running a tight ship, as Jonathan was talking about. But then it was really about building trust with people. He built an incredible level of trust both ways with people, everybody he worked with. And then, and then there was a word that came through a lot, and Michael, you might have been the first to use it in our interviews, was love. And you don't hear that very much in the workplace, especially not in the Valley. And he built, a true level of love and respect with the people that he worked with, and which helped teams. The teams that he worked with, he was a coach of teams, not an individual coach. People think of executive coaching as a one-on-one thing, but he would coach all of the people on a team and really create, through that love and trust, turn that team into a community.
So obviously Bill's career is legendary and had a huge impact, but why should the rest of us care about his story? What can they learn from the $1 trillion coach?
Well, what we've tried to do in the $1 trillion coach is really open source Bill's Playbook, to use a software term. And we were going through a lot of these interviews, and you think, well, Bill Campbell was a unique individual. That's interesting stories, but no one can do what he did. But what came through over and over again was a series of principles, again, about things like building trust, listening to people, how do you make a decision, which we really think anyone can do, not just Bill. And you don't need an executive coach. Really, any leader, any manager can do these things. So that's what we've tried to put into the book, is these set of a couple of dozen principles that he did, but really we all can learn from. We all can practice.
And I think the most fundamental lesson is that in a corporation, we tend to think of the individual as the thing that we're managing and trying to get the most out of. And what Bill helped us recognize is that corporations are built on teams. And it's the team that's the fundamental building block of the company. And it's getting those egos, particularly in tech, to work together, to smooth out the tension between these people with ambition and egos on teams and get them to operate as a team and manage them as a team and not just manage them as individuals.
So you talk about strong personalities, and you talk about, I mean, Bill Campbell went for a weekly walk with Steve Jobs and worked with Eric Schmidt intimately. I mean, a bunch of strong personalities, strong ideas. What was Bill's trick to working with those type of strong personalities?
Well, I mean, he would break people down. I mean, he certainly did that to me. There was a great story when an article came out in Valleywag, Tyrants of Tech, and it had Steve Jobs and Mark Benioff and David Colburn, and number 9 on the list was Jonathan Rosenberg, who would not throw chairs but would yell at people. And Bill brought me into his office one day and took me to the woodshed and basically said, I know Steve Jobs. I work with Steve Jobs. You're not Steve Jobs. I don't want you yelling at people like that. That's not why we have you around here.
Well, you forgot to mention that you were especially proud of that.
Yeah, I was proud.
By the way, it's a great story in the book.
As someone who worked for Jonathan at the time, he sent it to his team. Look what I did.
Yeah, Bill basically said, what would your mother say?
Right.
So one of the things that he would do would be, he would break you down and then help you understand what your weaknesses are, like a football player, and then build you back up. But interestingly, with some of those really driven, high-ego people, he largely tolerated them. And he would bucket them into people who were such geniuses that they could produce products that were better than everybody else, and he would tolerate that. But if they were egotistical and didn't put the team first and weren't trustworthy, then he would push them out. So he had a level of tolerance for some of those people if they were good enough. But the ones who couldn't accept putting the team first or wanted the limelight shined on them, he wouldn't accept.
Well, one thing you need to understand, you said if they're good enough, but these people, Bill called them aberrant geniuses, and they can create enormous value in a company. I think we've all worked with these people that are very difficult to work with, but wow, are they good. And so, I think Bill felt and taught you that not just work with them, but protect them, because the rest of the group will try to get rid of them. But then there becomes a point when the aberrant outweighs the genius, and you have to figure out what to do in those situations.
So executive coaching is currently in vogue. What are the differences between an executive or a coach and a manager?
So I think managers, they control, they supervise, they dictate tasks, they evaluate your performance. Managers, or coaches, support you. They put trust in you, they respect you, and they teach you to be better, and they evangelize for you. And Bill was just a terrific, what we call, evangelist for courage. He would constantly make you feel like you could do better. And even today, I kind of hear his voice in my head when I feel like something is going to be too difficult. I can hear Bill saying, oh, you're going to be on stage with Mike, don't fuck it up.
And that's what he'd say.
That's what he'd say.
I sort of think of it as an equation. There's management, and then there's coaching, and if you put them together, you get leadership. And you can do both, but there are times when you need to be a manager, and you need to say, okay, what are our numbers? We got to hit these numbers. We're going to do this. You're going to go do that. And then there are times when you're the coach, which is more, what do you want to get out of this? What are your objectives? How can I help you? How can I support you? It's trust, it's support, it's respect. And if you combine them both, that's how you become a leader.
I think you touched on this somewhat with the team, but how do you think that Bill's football experience, coaching experience kind of contributed or influenced his business principles?
Well, Bill would say that business is a team sport. It's not about individuals doing well, it's about the team doing well. And football is also all about a team sport. The superstar, the aberrant genius, might be the quarterback, But the offensive lineman's got to do a good job too, and everybody's got to come together as a team, integrate their egos, put aside differences, come together for the community. And I think that's, that translates exactly.
I think he would also focus on people who had a team-first attitude. And even in business, he would always focus on picking the right players, right? In football, you got to have the right talent. And when he had a problem, he wouldn't get everyone focused on the problem. He would focus on whether or not he had the right team. And so the things that he learned in football and the values that he taught in football were very similar to the things that he taught in business. He wanted to get the relationships between the players correct in football. He wanted to get players trusting each other. On an offensive line, you got to trust the guy on your left, you got to trust the guy on your right. He would manage all of those pairwise combinations of relationships and make sure that people trusted each other and were focused on the team and not themselves.
And I think there was an interesting anecdote about the coach's power of observation. We talked to a gentleman who had coached with Bill back in the 70s, and he said Bill had a talent where, most of us when we watch sports, we watch the ball, and you see one player and the person who tackles the ball carrier. And Bill could watch a play, and this was before there was video, and also know what all the other players were doing. Like have a broader view of observation and be able to see the whole field. And he brought that into his coaching. He'd sit in Eric's staff meeting, and Eric and Jonathan might be talking to one or two people, and Bill could look around and see who was uncomfortable, who was not happy with what was going on. And this is, again, a coaching skill that he brought into the business world.
Ronnie Lott, the Hall of Fame safety for the 49ers, was coached by Bill and was also coached by Bill Walsh. And he said, coaches have a unique skill. They lie awake at night and think about how to make other people better.
Yeah.
And that's what Bill did in the business world. He would teach us to spend all of our time thinking about how do we make these people better.
Yeah. Well, Ronnie has been participating in this summit at least 3 or 4 times, and not a better person than Ronnie Lott. I mean, just a sensational guy. So you have a great story in the book about Eric Schmidt, and Eric Schmidt at one point was chairman and CEO, but as the company was going public, the board basically thought it was a better governance, better principle to separate the 2 jobs, and how Eric responded to that and how Bill coached him through that. Can you share that story?
Well, that came out, I hadn't even heard that story. I guess it was public knowledge. Eric called it a de-chairmaning. And Eric told us that story when we were working on the book, which I had not heard before, which was Google went public in 2004, and as part of the process of going public, the board decided they needed a different chairman. And Eric had been CEO and chairman for 3 years. And so the board asked Eric to step down as chairman, but to stay on as CEO. And Eric was really hurt by this. His pride was hurt. And he decided to make what would have been the dumbest financial decision of his life. And he decided he was going to quit as CEO and chairman. He was going to walk away from all of it. And he called up Bill, and he said, that's it. I'm done. They don't appreciate me. I'm quitting. And Bill immediately recognized that this was a question of pride and not a rational decision. But he also saw that what Eric was going to do was going to hurt the team. It's going to hurt Google. And so Bill talked to Eric off the cliff and basically said, no, you shouldn't quit. You need to do what's right for the team here. Swallow your pride. Continue on as CEO. And when the time is right, you'll come back as chairman. We'll make that happen. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. So one of the other things in the book that was such a good lesson, we kind of talked about a little bit, but you have Scotty Kramer, Bill's driver in New York City, throughout the book. And Scotty was a driver, but Bill treated Bobby or Scotty like family. His caddy down in Mexico came to his funeral. I mean, I think the lessons is just how to treat people. That everybody deserves respect. And
he was amazing with that with everyone. And if you didn't do it, he'd teach you to do it by example.
Right.
And he did it to me one day when normally I would go to his office to meet with him. And one day he came to my office because he had some other meetings at Google. And I was in an interview with someone from the East Coast who was running late. And so Bill was waiting outside my office, which you don't usually do, right? I mean, usually here on time. So I see him out there, and he's talking to my admin. And he's like, go ahead, Jonathan, finish your interview. Don't worry about it. And he comes in. He's like, Jonathan, when are you writing Sade's recommendation for law school? Well, I don't know, Bill. I didn't know she was applying to law school. He's like, how can you not know your admin wants to go to law school? And that was pretty fascinating. He said, I only just met her, and in 3 minutes, I know more about what her goals in life are than you do. And it was my admin. I didn't think he was talking about something of substance to my admin, but he did. And then he helped her get into law school.
So in the book, you say that Bill say one of the things Bill hated was consensus. What do you mean by that?
Well, do your Bill imitation.
Come on, consensus. Now let's get to this decision.
I hate consensus.
I hate consensus.
Best idea.
Bill really taught us that you want to run a meeting and a decision-making process where people come in and everybody speaks. We focus on data if we have data. We hear from all of the people in the room. We get all of the ideas on the table. And then when we reach a point where people are bitching or moaning, a manager makes a decision. And he often felt that no decision festering was a lot worse than even a bad decision. And he really hated the idea of a large group of people arriving at an answer by whatever it was that they could all agree on, because generally that's the most watered down answer.
So one of his close friends, probably his closest friends, Mike Homer, and I don't know if this is Mike's original quote, or he borrowed this from somebody else, but said, we got data, when we got facts, we use facts, but when we don't,
That's Jim Barksdale.
Jim Barksdale.
Right.
If we have data, let's use data. If all we have are opinions, let's use mine.
Yeah, that's a great one. So what are the one or two best things that you learned from Bill?
You know, getting back to what I said earlier, love. You know, you mentioned Scotty Kramer, and who was Bill's driver in New York for 20, 25 years. And Jonathan and I spent a delightful afternoon.
Yeah.
We went up to Columbia, and Scotty drove us around and told us Bill's stories, and just loved the man. And you know, the simple things that you can do to get to know people on your team, and get to really care about them, they're simple. We all have them inside of us, but we don't take the time to do it. And that's what I learned from talking to all these people, is just take the time to get to know people as people. Don't just run back to your desk. You know, stop and chat for a couple minutes.
For me, astonishingly, it was the basics of management. It was, how do you do a one-on-one? You know, to Bill, there were 4 attributes: performance, or relationships with peers, performance on the job, innovation, and management practices. And he taught me to make a list of those things, meet with people, see their list, compare the lists, and that would tell us if we had the right priorities. And each week, I'd go through my priorities for them based on those attributes. And he taught me how to run a staff meeting. He taught me not to give tasks to people individually, which seemed like the most efficient way to me. He taught me to have people leave in pairs so that they could do things together, so that the next time we had a problem that we were trying to solve as a team, they'd built a relationship with each other. So just the basics. As you know, I was 41 years old, and I'd been a senior VP at a big company in the Valley, and how I was running my staff meeting, and how I was dictating tasks, and how I was giving out work was wrong.
So in the book also, you had a great story on Dan Rosenzweig, the CEO of Chegg, and how he had a board member that just didn't read the material. Tell that story. That was a...
Well, it was talking about we were talking about how to manage boards. And Dan was having a problem with a board member who would come to a meeting just completely unprepared and would waste a lot of time going over things that other people had prepared. And Bill said, no, Dan, it's not his problem, it's your problem. You're not preparing your board members properly. You need to show them the materials, tell them exactly tell them what to do. So Dan did that, and the next board meeting, the guy shows up, again, wasting everybody's time, hadn't done the homework, and Dan tells Bill that, and Bill says, you were right, Dan, fire the guy.
Like instantly.
Right.
I think he said it more colorfully.
Right. So just in closing, and this interview went way too fast, why should somebody read Trillion Dollar Coach?
So I think people should read Trillion Dollar Coach because all managers need to get the best out of their people. And we pay lip service to the notion that people come first. But you need to show them that. You need to trust them, respect them, support them, and then you need to challenge them to be better. And I think what the book does is give you a playbook for some simple things that you can do that most people today don't do, that they can pretty easily implement in their own lives.
Sensational. Thank you very much.
Our pleasure.
Thanks.